welcome to the workshop from the German Red Cross research team. I'm very pleased that you have found your way here today. Before the workshop starts and we introduce ourselves and our research team, we have to talk about a few organizational details. My colleague Eva Steinberger is responsible for the technical support today, so she will keep an eye on the chat. So you are always welcome to post questions, comments, or remarks there. And they will be taken up in the workshop later on. So especially more complex word contributions, it's also worthwhile to report them directly with the hand sign feature. So we can just respond to it directly. So this workshop is intended to be an interactive workshop and provides the opportunity to exchange our ideas. We are therefore very curious about your experiences and impressions, which is why I will come back to you from time to time during the course of this workshop. This will happen either online on a platform, and the links to the platform you will find in the chat, or with direct questions in an interactive discussion. Please mute yourself, or you are already muted, so please stay muted until you want to speak. Okay, but let's start at the beginning. Who are we and where are we working, and on what are we actually working? So I already mentioned Eva Steinberger briefly. She's working with our colleague Laura Aßmann on the PsychoCAD project, which is concerned with psychosocial emergency care. The two of them will talk about it later in more detail. I am Tessa Bodynek, and I work in the same security research and innovation transfer team of the German Red Cross as Eva and Laura do, but in a different project. My project is called Atlas Engage and deals with the diversity of civil society engagement in civil protection. But here too, I will have the opportunity to report a little more concretely later on. So first of all, I would like to take you on a short excursion into our team so that you can understand how we do research here at the German Red Cross headquarters. And meanwhile, you will find a link in the chat to a Padlet in which you can briefly introduce yourself, please. So because due to the limited time today, there's unfortunately not enough room for a real introductory round. So of course, we are still very interested in finding out who's here today and why you are interested in the topic of facets of engagement in civil protection. So please write your name and your association or the country where you're coming from in the headline, and your motivation why you attended this workshop in the comment field. So, but now straight away to the security research and innovation transfer team. Our team has been involved in national and international security research since 2009. It is linked to the German Red Cross headquarters in Berlin. And in various projects, we deal with the areas of civil security, risk management, and innovation transfer. The core topics of our research are social changes and trends and their influence on societal behavior in crises and disasters, but as well topics like vulnerability and resilience of the society, as well as general population protection topics. To give you a better insight into our work, I will briefly present the projects currently running in our team. The RESIG and AURIG projects are nearing completion this summer. In particular, they deal with the resilience of socioeconomic infrastructures in crises and disasters, as well as the maintenance of ambulatory care infrastructures. Specifically, they deal with evacuation scenarios of hospitals and decentralized care, but also with the maintenance of ambulatory care structures in the event of a crisis or disaster. In addition, there are two German Red Cross internal evaluation projects. One is dealing with the devastating flood of 2021 in the German Ahr Valley, and another with vulnerabilities during the COVID-19 pandemic. Their aim is to analyze the German Red Cross internal structures and to improve them for the future on basis of the insights they gain. Yeah, further, I've already mentioned our projects, Atlas Engage and PsychoCut, on which the workshop is based today. Yeah, for each of the completed research projects of our team, there's a publication series that records their results. And these documents you can download for free on the German Red Cross research web page, where you can find a link in the chat as well. Some of the publications are also available in English, not all, unfortunately. And also, unfortunately, the web page at the moment is currently not running in English. So if afterwards you need help downloading some of the papers, just let us know. Okay, so, but now we are going to start with a small thematical teaser. Yeah, there we want to point out the urgency and relevance of diverse voluntary engagement in crisis and disaster. Certainly, it is undisputed that voluntary engagement in general is of enormous importance in civil protection, particularly in crisis, disasters, or major emergencies. We are dependent on broad-based support from volunteers. On the one hand, we are talking, of course, about the intensively trained professional, or let's say classic volunteer forces of aid organizations, which have always been a cornerstone of civil protection. But on the other hand, there's also the various independent and flexible forms of civil society engagement, which are becoming increasingly important in our globalized and digitalized world. The changes concerning the engagement behavior of volunteers are certainly a result of the increasingly frequent and sometimes even multiple crisis situation, but as well of social transformation processes that lead to changes in the motivational structure of volunteers. In recent years, there have been clear signs of a decline in the willingness to perform a traditional and often very time-consuming and training-intensive voluntary service, as for example with the aid organization like the Red Cross. However, the willingness to help is by no means diminishing. On the contrary, there is an increase, especially in self-organized help from the population, which arises spontaneously in specific crisis situations. A current example is the enormous willingness to help at various German railway stations last year in order to support and supply Ukrainian refugees in transit. Another one is the flood disaster in the German Ahr Valley that I already mentioned. It showed us that we won't be able to avoid dealing with civilians who are willing to help in crises and disasters. This is due to the fact that, as we have seen in the Ahr Valley, helpers simply come to the place of action and help. And if there are no existing structures to which they can connect, they organize themselves. This self-organization has worked very well in some areas of the Ahr Valley. But in other parts, it has led to blocking of access roads or frustration due to the lack of communication between helpers and professionals, and thus rather to problems. It has become clear, however, that people willing to help are an important resource, especially if their involvement is good coordinated, or at least if there is a good communication between the civilian population and professional actors of the aid organization. Research in recent years have clearly shown that new forms of engagement offer an enormous potential in civil protection, and that they can be meaningfully integrated into existing structures of authorities and organizations with security responsibilities. In order to enable a good cooperation between all actors in the event of an operation, it is important to understand the mechanisms that underlie the handling of unaffiliated volunteers and the challenges and potentials associated with them. The exchange of research and practice, as well as the transfer of relevant concepts, ideas, and projects to the different areas of civil protection, are also crucial for the understanding of the field. So now I would like to introduce the first somewhat interactive part of the workshop. We have prepared another Padlet where you can find the link in the chat. And for everybody who joined later, there's another Padlet link to an introductory round where we would be really interested in knowing who joins us here today for this workshop. So in this Padlet, or this palette you can consider somehow as a kind of brainstorming on the topic. We would like to know which forms of engagement you are familiar with and what you have to deal with in your everyday work or in your voluntary work. The main idea is kind of to sort out the present together in order to get an overview of the current international situation on the topic of various forms of engagement. So yeah, please start your comments with your name anyhow, or your affiliation, or the country you're writing from, so that we can later on refer better to your contributions in the following discussion. So yeah, I would say here we go. Just click on the link, and I'll just give it 1 or 2 minutes, and you can fulfill it later on. So it's just for us that we can read and have an exchange, and as well you can comment also the other comments from the others. So maybe we can get a little bit into exchange about it. Yeah. So I have a sip of water. So, and if the links are not working, you can as well just comment here or something, then we can just sort it out together. And if not, just take your time. We can talk about it later as well. And it's just also nice for us to read about it later, or maybe to see the comments. So then, yeah, we can talk about it. Eva, there are no comments right now, right? Okay, so we will just wait for it, and maybe I will already continue with the presentation of the Atlas Engage project. And yeah, like I said, feel free to just continue writing and exchanging, and yeah. Okay. So Atlas Engage, the project Atlas Engage focuses on changes in the engagement behavior of volunteers and aims to record the different forms of voluntary engagement in a kind of typology. In addition, a comprehensive analysis of German, but as well of international research projects and practical approaches to the topic is the aim of the project. Yeah, Atlas Engage is funded by the German Federal Office of Civil Protection and Disaster Assistance and led by the Disaster Research Unit of Freie Universität Berlin. The German Red Cross is involved in this project as a subcontractor. Thus, we contribute to the research, but also provide a deeper insight into the practical structures of our organization. As a social and cultural anthropologist, I myself particularly work with qualitative methodology, which allows me to gain a deeper insight into the underlying structures of dealing with new forms of engagement in the German Red Cross. In my research, it became clear that the topic of spontaneous helpers and new forms of engagement is becoming more and more urgent. On the one hand, this is due to the increase in the number of emergencies, and on the other hand, it correlates with changing circumstances in the motivational structure of volunteers. These are influenced by current social trends, such as the demographic change, the globalization, digitalization, and of course, the climate change. The best way to illustrate this, however, is certainly with the words of one of my interview partners with whom I have spoken about this in recent months. She said, quote, "We have been in a state of emergency for 2 years. Will we return to a normal state? Personally, I don't think so. I think we will remain in a certain crisis situation. You can see that yourself in your daily workload or in your professional life. The pressure is so high that you can't get out of it, because there's always something new. And yes, I closed the vaccination center on July 31st and said, the next thing we'll do is refugees. I should have stuck it for once." Further, she continues, "The folks really want to help on a project-related basis. They just come for the sake of the cause, for this one project, at short time actually. This doesn't just affect us at the Red Cross, it affects all of the other organizations and the fire brigade in the same way. There's simply a lack of volunteers who are trained in a specialized way, so they can then also be available for civil protection. Two things become very clear at this point. First, the need for more support in operational situations exists at the practical level in almost all areas and concerns all authorities and organizations with security tasks, not only the German Red Cross. And second, we must now find a good way to integrate flexible forms of engagement into our existing structures and thus enable coordinated cooperations in emergency situations. Yeah, but what exactly needs to happen to work together with the civil society in times of crisis? For sure, there must be a better understanding of different forms of engagement in general and an improvement of the communication structures in exchange with the helping population. But there's more to be done. Especially the organizational structures for dealing with new forms of engagement needs to be modified in order for a profound change in mentality. This enables a rethinking towards unconventional forms of engagement. It is necessary to understand that unaffiliated volunteers are an important addition to professional task forces and that they can for no means replace them, but help them out. By direct communication with helping civilians, it is possible to identify the areas in which they are both best able and willing to help. After all, it is their free time, and if they can do something they really want to do, the chances are better that they will stay on board and, if necessary, help out even on for a longer period of time. In concrete terms, we, and I don't just mean the German Red Cross, but all actors of population protection, must start to ask ourselves how we want to deal with flexible engagement. What forms of commitment and what opportunities are there to get involved? And which tasks are possible for which type of helper? Are there maybe certain criteria that we can't work with this certain kind of helper? And what are the boundaries of unaffiliated work or unaffiliated volunteering? So yeah, these are definitely questions that we have asked us a lot in Atlas Engage and which we are currently trying to figure out with the help of a detailed analysis and a typology of different forms of engagement. Here we have examined different features and characteristics of engagement, such as, for example, the factor time. So how long does a person want to be involved? How constantly? In which phase of engagement? Or how involved is she herself? So, or with other factors like the degree of cooperation with civil protection actors. For example, do they cooperate? Do they communicate? Or perhaps not at all? Or are they even involved in the structures or tasks of disaster response organizations such as the German Red Cross in a way? Generally, the German Red Cross has different approaches to deal with unaffiliated volunteers. One of the most prominent approaches is the registration of helpers through the so-called team structures. Here, helpers can be registered both in advance or even directly in the situation at site. But also certain soft skills, language skills, technical abilities, etc. This ensures that the helpers from this pool can be specifically requested and deployed for the specialized task. Due to the federal structure and regional differences of the German Red Cross, the team structures are not available in all parts of Germany. Nevertheless, it is also possible to work with unaffiliated volunteers in different ways. A registration, however, is always recommended due to insurance coverage. Another service for the coordination of unaffiliated volunteers deals with the training and further education of traditional command and emergency forces of the GRC. It is indispensable to generate more sensitivity and tolerance amongst professionals concerning helpers from the civil society. For the future, we have identified areas for action that need to be specifically addressed. These include, above all, the need for coordination and concrete responsibilities, and also for better networking among the actors of civil protection, which includes a better communication structures in the end. This is especially necessary regarding the interaction with spontaneous helpers and other flexible forms of engagement. Another important understanding is the discrepancy between full-time forces and volunteers. We need to understand that volunteers, as well as unaffiliated helpers, mainly work in the evening and on the weekends, and need to be able to contact professional responsibles during that time. The digitalization is another pretty important factor. Helpers especially organize themselves via WhatsApp or Facebook groups, and as a disaster relief organization, we as German Red Cross need to be part of this as well to offer our help and knowledge in this context. Another important point certainly is the training of professional emergency task forces to promote a mind-changing process for more openness concerning flexible forms of engagement. This ensures more sensitivity in dealing with unaffiliated volunteers. Everyone must realize that the qualification and skills of unaffiliated volunteers in crisis and disasters can enrich us enormously. And to close the circle and maybe tease a little bit the following contribution of my colleague Laura from the PsychoCat project, I want to refer to the importance of physical and psychosocial well-being of all types of helpers in crisis situations. Unfortunately, especially unaffiliated volunteers often happen to be overlooked by existing structures of the ad organizations. So this was just a small glimpse to the topics with which we concern ourselves in context of the Atlas Engage project. Before this backdrop, we are particularly interested in how to deal with the changing structures in the engagement behavior of the civil society in the future. So yeah, thank you very much for your attention. And before I pass on to my colleague Laura, I would open the room for questions. So yeah, either directly per hand sign feature or in the chat. Eva, sorry, is there somebody or some questions? No? Okay. So you will also have the opportunity to ask later on. But then I will pass on to Laura and yeah, we will continue here. Zack.
Okay. Perfect. Yes, so thank you and hello from my side. As Tessa already mentioned, my colleagues Eva, Yasmin, and I work for the project PsychoCat. And in the next few minutes, I will introduce this project and some of the questions that we grapple with. So yeah, let's dive right in. Next, please. As Tessa, next slide. Yes, perfect, thank you. As Tessa pointed out, emergency situations have started to become more complex, long, and also overlapping. And as you can imagine, this can result in increasing levels of stress and other psychosocial consequences, not only for the affected populations, but of course also for the volunteers. On top of that, the importance of psychological well-being has just been acknowledged more and more in these recent years. Next, please. So some examples of recent disasters which have then highlighted the importance and also the need of psychosocial emergency care are, for instance, the war of aggression against Ukraine, COVID-19, of course, as we all know, and also the flood in the Ahr Valley, as shown on this photo. And it is against this backdrop that the PsychoCat project was developed. Next, please. So the project is funded by the German Federal Ministry of Education and Research. It is a joint project where our colleagues from the Free University of Berlin focus on an understanding of the current psychosocial condition of German society at large, actually. Eva, Yasmin, and I look at different aspects of psychosocial emergency care, specifically in the German Red Cross. And in particular, we look at the documentation and evaluation methods. At the end of the project, the results will then be presented in our publication series, and our colleagues from the Fraunhofer Institute will make the results accessible through a somewhat interactive website. But let's actually take a step back and quickly look at the definition of psychosocial emergency care. So what are we talking about? Next, please. As I mentioned, psychosocial stress increases in emergency situations. This can have long-term consequences, such as post-traumatic stress disorder. But we also know that mental health difficulties can be reduced the sooner people receive adequate and good support. So what does that mean? It basically means we do need good and effective short, medium, and long-term answers. And psychosocial emergency care can be seen as a rather direct and more short-term response. And the basic assumption here is that individual and also social protective factors are usually automatically activated in emergency situations to cope. So in a way, psychosocial care plays only a supplementary role. It is important when these protective resources are insufficient or when they are lacking. Then the goal is, or the goals are to strengthen coping resources, to promote protective factors, but also to prevent psychological disorders. In the classical and organizational sense, psychosocial emergency care is divided into the care for people who are affected by crises and the care for volunteers and staff. And the form and the content of this care may then vary depending on the area. Something that we try to understand better is the psychosocial landscape in psychosocial care landscape in Germany, specifically in the German Red Cross. Next, please. So for now, we don't have exact numbers on the German Red Cross. But to fill that void, we collected data on psychosocial structures across Germany through an online survey. This survey was closed last Monday, so very shortly we will have a better overview. But we know that at the moment, psychosocial emergency care is provided by around 100 teams that are spread across Germany. Important to note here, these teams mainly consist of volunteers. In many places, the teams cooperate with other aid organizations or churches. And in looking closer at the topic of volunteering, I would like to address two aspects and some of the related questions that we try to understand a bit better. Next, please. Yeah, so as I've said, psychosocial emergency care is mostly based on volunteering. The conditions which these volunteers face are having to go through a very intensive and long training, coping with incredibly stressful situations, and also carrying a great deal of responsibility. So it is very impressive what these volunteers provide at the end of the day. But there are some challenges and important questions as well. For example, what are the advantages and disadvantages of psychosocial emergency care being delivered mainly on a voluntary basis? Also, what are the challenges of these increasingly complex emergencies? For instance, how can the teams better address the psychosocial needs that arise in such different and varying contexts? Here, we think a good form of documentation and a psychosocial situation monitoring could be one approach, which would then allow for a better understanding and also a better targeting. And this is something that we and our colleagues from the Free University try to examine at the moment. And also, would this require even more training for the volunteers? For example, the psychosocial care skills needed during COVID may differ quite a lot from working with refugee communities. And yes, lastly, what kind of support and what kind of care do the teams need themselves? Next, please. Well, that was one too many. Great. And yes, as Tessa also already highlighted, volunteering is a dynamic field. New forms of volunteering and connected questions need to receive more attention. So, for example, what are the consequences of the changing dynamics in volunteerism? We know that these classical forms of volunteering are decreasing while more spontaneous forms are increasing. And what does this actually mean for the psychosocial emergency care structures, especially knowing that it requires such a long and intensive training? Also, what are the needs that these different volunteer groups themselves have, like digital volunteers or unaffiliated volunteers? Just last week, I actually had a very interesting interview with a person who worked at the Berlin Central Station when many refugees from Ukraine arrived. She experienced the challenges and the opportunities of unaffiliated volunteering. She very much noticed that these volunteers are not only exposed to the usual stressors that staff and volunteers face, but they also experience additional stressors, such as lack of training or not being part of an established team or not having the knowledge about psychosocial support structures or self-care tools to just take care of themselves. And her takeaway from that, we do need to pay more attention to unaffiliated volunteers and their needs. So building on that, what kind of resources are then needed to ensure sufficient psychosocial emergency care structures for all of these different volunteer groups? I saw that tonight there will be an interesting workshop specifically on volunteers' well-being hosted by the Reference Center for Psychosocial Support. So for those of you who are interested in this topic, I think that this workshop seems like a great opportunity to dive in even more. So on that note, thank you for listening, and I pass back on to Tessa.
Yes, thank you, Laura. Yeah, first of all, are there any questions concerning what Laura explained, or maybe what I said before, like yeah, stage is yours for question, or if I say something in the chat, then already great, also grateful for that. So yeah, nothing in the chat. Okay, good. Then we have prepared a few questions for you. So for our discussion in this panel. So yeah, we have various different points. Maybe for me in the beginning, it would be really interesting to know which concepts do you have, or what are you doing in your Red Cross, Red Crescent community? What forms of engagement do you cope with? Yeah, this would be very interesting for me. Maybe somebody can enlighten me here. Or as well, I saw in the group that there, so in the Padlets, that there were a lot of impressions also about digital volunteering and stuff. So this would also be interesting to know how in other Red Cross, Red Crescent movements, yeah, you take this scene. Yeah. Okay, then I continue maybe with some of the next questions, and yeah, we would be really happy if you join us for the questions. So yeah, we were thinking about as well what potentials exist in the context of different forms of engagement, and how you work in your community with different forms, because in Germany, for example, there's always or often a big focus on spontaneous helpers who just arrive at the site, and then the emergency forces need to cope with that and to handle that. And yeah, sometimes sometimes this is kind of hard if there are no existing structures how to handle spontaneous volunteers. But yeah, one can say that that there are a lot of ideas, like I already explained, with these team structures and the registration of these helpers, or maybe to connect with some companies or ambassadors at site, so that we can work together. So maybe you got an impression how it is in your community with these topics.
I trying to break the ice. Hello, I'm Jonas.
Hi.
I can only give you a view from another German Red Cross member, so that's
okay,
maybe
nice.
not as international, but
yeah, but it's okay.
but better than nothing, I think.
Yeah,
so
perfect.
I'm from the area of the Eifel, so we also got hit by the flood, not as hard as the people in the Ahrtal, and we coped with the amount of spontaneous helpers, as there were already in many villages some like some tents or some spots developed from people who lived there, who worked as a community together. So we used these spots to get into the different villages and ask them. And so they collected all the information for us, what the people need, what they want. And then we just put it to the main area in the village. And then they could like spread it out to the other people who really needed it. And that was way easier for us to cope with the whole situation than to micromanage every volunteer, because they did a great job with that on their own. So they didn't really needed us for that. They needed us for the big logistical questions.
Okay, but so there have been also a kind of cooperation between Red Cross and civilian helpers.
Yes.
Okay.
At the start, it was a lot about rescue, obviously. So there was a lot of Red Cross things involved. But after that, it was really important also to split up the big groups of Red Cross helpers, like main Red Cross helpers, who came, for example, from other Landesverbände, so that they were not, so we didn't put like 25 cars into one small village. So they came to us, we split them up, and then they supported each and every village in the area, and that worked really well.
And it was also like kind of not registered, right? It was like more really unaffiliated work in this sense.
Yes, like I think we never coped with a situation like this, and nobody thought about registering people at this point. Everybody just tried to help as much as possible. And we had a lot of situation coming back to the problems with mental health, that people worked with us and then they went home and then they put on their shoes and took a shovel and went around the corner and helped their neighbors. So we had to take a lot of care and say, it's enough, just stop, calm down, because people work too much.
Yeah, they were too motivated to help in this sense, right?
Yes.
Okay. Yeah. Well, that's a kind of a problem, but also kind of nice to see this willingness to help, actually. Yeah. Thank you very much for the contribution. So it doesn't matter that it's also from Germany, then this has a big impact on that. Okay. I see there are some more hand signs. I don't know who was first. Now there's just Adrian. So Adrian, please.
Hi, good day, everyone.
Hi.
Adrian from the Jamaica Red Cross. In our context, the main challenges that we see right now is the fact that majority of our volunteers tend to be on the older side of life. So we have a very limited number of younger volunteers. So in certain situations, like for example, during the COVID-19 pandemic, we wouldn't have been able to have as many persons out in the communities as we would have wanted. And then on top of the pandemic, we also had tropical storms that would have hit Jamaica. So we had a lot of landslides, flooded out communities, people getting displaced, homes destroyed, and those kind of things. So then we had a core set of volunteers who we had to have out there every day. So those persons now would have been overworked in some cases because, you know, we don't have anybody that can go in to help them out additionally, or to, you know, any backup persons, for want of a better terming, to go in and assist them. So that is one of the main issues that we have right now. Apart from that, in some cases we might have limited resources, but what we usually do is partner with local ministries. So for example, if we don't have food items to take into communities, then for example, Ministry of Labor and Social Security will provide us with that material, and we would then be the ones who go in to help with the distribution and so on. So partnerships in our local context has been with various ministries and so on, have been what has helped out in a lot of situations whenever they do pop up. So yeah.
But have you made experiences as well with like some kind of unconventional forms of engagement? Like, for example, maybe also younger people who were just hearing about the need of help and are just showing up at the place or something, or not so much?
Well, not in my time working with the Red Cross, but I've heard of cases where, for example, we've had major storms and persons will pop up at our national headquarters office wanting to volunteer and so on. But in those cases now, what they had to do was, you know, go through the persons, you know, see how they could go about filtering out those who are just there wanting to maybe steal something or something like that. And, you know, trying to see how best you can go about getting the persons who are genuinely interested in helping to actually help out.
Okay, but have there been there have not been a special system to handle this engagement, right? It was
not at the moment. We're still in the process of trying to get certain things formalized. So we're still in the process of trying to get these things in place so we can actually better filter persons and help them to, you know, fall into different areas. So what we've been also doing is working in various communities. So we've been training groups in response in emergency, shelter management, first aid, and those kind of things. So we've been working with various community citizens groups in communities to try to have them, in case the Red Cross isn't able to go there right away, then they would have material preposition, so supplies, equipment, and those kind of things in place, so they are able to assist their persons in the communities until additional help can get there.
Yes. Yeah, I think this is kind of similar in Germany because we are recognizing that there is a need to change the structures of our working with volunteers, because the structure of volunteering is changing as well. So yeah, we are also right at the beginning of that, and we hope to figure out a good systems. And yeah, these team structures that I mentioned are a beginning, and also, like I said, they are not everywhere in Germany at the moment. So yeah, let's see how this turns out, how all this turns out in the future.
Yes, definitely.
Yeah.
The structure that we use to help out in those cases is what we refer to as area groups. So you might have the branch in each different parish or section of the country, yes. But then apart from that, we have the smaller group in the smaller communities. So they are able to then provide us with updates at the national headquarters or at the branch level. So these smaller groups then have material there, again, prepositioned, so they're able to assist or help out until further help can be mobilized to that area. So that is one approach that we have been using to getting assistance to persons. So they may not necessarily be Red Crossers or Red Cross volunteers, yes, but they are equipped with enough information that they're able to administer help until additional help can be brought in.
And then there are kind of corporations. Okay, got it. Yeah, very nice. Thanks for the contribution. Yeah, I don't know. We have kind of more questions, but yeah, I don't know. There's just also not too much time left. So I guess if there's one more question or comment or remark, yeah, we would be really happy to exchange with you. So let us know. Aßmann.
Thank you very much. Hi, good to see you.
Yeah, good to see you too.
Thanks so much for this presentation. It was really inspiring. And I'm really happy that I'm from the IFRC, so I don't work with the National Society. I don't coordinate volunteers per se.
Yes.
But that is something that, I mean, you know, with the new volunteering policy, we're really encouraging national societies to look at how to organize volunteering a bit more different. And I had maybe just maybe a quick question back to you, because you talk about sort of openness and flexibility when you give opportunities for people to volunteer. And I was just wondering, how did that work out in actually sort of influencing the senior management to become more of a flexible and open organization? And the reason I say that is also what Adrian was mentioning, a lot of, because we want to protect ourselves a lot, right? So like, because whatever somebody wears the Red Cross badge, it's the reputational risk and everything. And some people a lot of times want to really control, right? So
Yes.
it's very, very hard to sort of then, how do you work with unaffiliated volunteers, etc.? And sometimes that gets really stuck at the higher level of, you know, leadership of the National Society. And I'm just wondering whether you have anything to share in terms of how that process, that influence to the leadership of your National Society came about to allow for this.
Yes.
Thanks.
Yeah, thanks for this question. Yeah, I guess like the German Red Cross does want more commitment in this sector, because we are recognizing that there are a lot of people willing to help, and we just confront ourselves in a lot of crisis scenarios with a lot of people just showing up and wanting to help. And we recognize that we don't have the structures to work with these people who are there and who want to help. And I think therefore, like, as well, the headquarters said, like, yeah, we should engage more with this topic. But in the end, like, what have happened now is that in the smaller groups or at site where something happened, there are popping up ideas like, okay, we could do that, or we can register people, or we can work with them like that. But in the last years, it was more like everybody had to invent it new, kind of. And yeah, this is a pity, because there are a lot of ideas, but it's always a lot of work as well to work with this. So yeah, we are hoping that in the future we can have a broader system that everybody can use, and broader informations, documents, and everything that also is coming from the research area as well, so that we can connect research and practice a little bit more. And then just provide as well all the documents, everything they need to know to handle unaffiliated volunteers and to work together with them. So I think we are still really still in a process to sort this out very good, but we have a lot of really good examples in small areas in Germany where we can connect. And yeah, I hope this will work out in the future. Yeah. Okay.
Thank you very much. I'm looking forward to all the different research. I hope they're available out well in English, or maybe not in German.
There are a few, but we have a little problem with this website. But yeah, we will figure it out.
Looking forward to it. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you very much. Okay, and then I think we are quite at the end. If there are no further contributions, I thank you all a lot for being here. I just continue to our last slide. So thank you very much. It was great having you here and to talk in this context about different forms of engagement and how we can cope with them in the future. And yeah, thank you, and enjoy the rest of the long night of research. Bye-bye.